Hi, in this lecture I'm going to be talking about the damp congested tissue state for which we use alteratives to correct. I'll talk in another lecture about specific alterative herbs, but it's interesting to speculate about what is the damp congested tissue state. Is it all about the extracellular matrix, so that when thinking about tissues, we're not just thinking about cells, of which this is a cell membrane, an outer cell membrane, but we're also thinking about the matrix in which those cells are embedded and the behavior of that matrix. And as you can see, it's made up of lots of protein and lots of carbohydrates. In perfect health, it's very well ordered, it functions well, everything works smoothly. However, in a damp congested tissue state, there is overall in the whole body stagnation, torpidity, and a reduced flow through the extracellular fluid. So to understand the problems that can cause, we'll come back to that in a minute, but the kind of clinical features you might expect with that stagnation, that stagnated state, is a lack of expression in the facial features. Maybe mannerisms are a bit unexpressive. The tissues themselves are quite lackluster, so you hear people talking about a doughy skin, that sort of thing. The tongue might be quite pale, it's flabby and large, there'll be tooth marks or crenellations, whatever you want to call them. There may be a thick coat, which could be white or it could be yellow. The pulse will possibly be obscure, so this is where you could confuse it with the over-relaxed tissue state, because there might be a very sort of feeble pulse there. But here the pulse could be quite strong, but it's obscure. It's difficult to find. Once you do find it, it might be quite a strong pulse. It has quite turgid quality to it, maybe sometimes described as slippery. If you can think of it as phlegm flowing through the blood. So it's very described as feeling like pearls under the fingers, or that it glides like a swan. So instead of the pulse kind of hitting your fingers like that, it kind of goes zip, zip, zip. Another way of thinking it would be like slugs slipping along your arteries. Nice thought. It correlates well. This humoral imbalance correlates well. The damp congested tissue state correlates well with an excess of phlegmatic humour, excessive cold and moisture, and in Ayurvedic terms, excessive kapha. There is an impaired metabolism. There's an incomplete conversion of food to healthy tissue. There's accumulation of nutrients and metabolic waste in the extracellular fluid. So this all makes for a potentially toxic swamp in the tissues. So how does this come about? Well, a traditional view of digestion is as follows: that the first digestion of food happens in the stomach and the intestines, and the products of that digestion are conveyed via the portal venous system to the liver, where the second and third digestions happen. Now, if you have nutrients of a superior quality, if you have nutrition of a superior quality, so your foods are full of nutrients, good balance, not too much stodge and refined flours, that sort of thing, then that can go to make a well-balanced blood. So in traditional terms, the blood humour is the paramount humour, and that's recognised as being the perfect admixture of the other three humours. So all of the humours are present in the blood, but if they're mixed in just the right proportions, you have a superior fluid which constitutes well-balanced blood. If nutrition is inferior and if digestion is poor, then you will instead make too much phlegm. So that's the traditional view of how we get a damp congested system. So in this damp congested state, the extracellular fluid or matrix becomes packed with unspecialized filler mucopolysaccharides. So there should be some mucopolysaccharides, but not as many as you get in this damp congested state. So then you get sort of this whole region between cells is all sort of clogged up. So just a reminder that these are the tissue cells with the extracellular fluid in between them. They rely on the blood supply to bring nutrients, oxygen and water to the tissue, and these diffuse out from the capillary down concentration gradient. They also rely on the excess water to some extent, the waste products of carbon dioxide and waste of metabolism, to be taken up by the capillaries and sent via the venules to the veins and eventually into the general circulation. So if the extracellular matrix is congested, so there's kind of all sorts of gunk accumulated between these cells, then you get poor perfusion of nutrients and oxygen to the tissue cells, and there's poor distribution of these vital components to the cells, and then there's also poor drainage to the venous system. Now remember that there is a secondary drainage just to make sure that this extracellular matrix is just the right kind of consistency and not too waterlogged, not too sort of dry, and not too filled with toxins and bacteria and so on. You've got a lymphatic system which kind of sort of siphons off excess. So in the congested tissue state, because the extracellular matrix is congested, then it's more difficult for the lymphatics to sort of drain off excess fluids as well. So you start to get edema or fluid accumulation in the tissues. Consequences: toxicosis, build-up of toxins, and I suppose you say one man's toxin is another man's meat in terms of different species, but the point is that the tissues have become literally intoxicated. So if you think about, let's take this through. Supposing you had a white bread bap for your lunch, maybe with cheese on, maybe two, more than you're used to, and you have a chocolate biscuit with it, and also hot chocolate, all these really phlegmy foods and very sugary. So what happens? You get polaxed, you can't think straight, you actually feel a bit drunk, you feel a bit intoxicated, and this is phlegm misting the mind. It's stops you from thinking straight, your memory's poor, your concentration goes, you get sleepy, somnolent. And this might be one explanation, because when I was describing these pulses, that slippery pulse, the only time in health when you would get that perfect health is if somebody is pregnant, so you get a slippery pulse then. And maybe this phlegm misting the mind, maybe that's an explanation for the so-called baby brain. Anyway, leave that one. The point about these waste products hanging about is that they might be waste to the human cells, but for other organisms that are just waiting in the wings, opportunistic pathogens, they can actually utilize those waste products and start to metabolize them, or produce their own toxins from metabolizing the stuff that is just clogging up the tissues. So the result is an inflammation, an irritation, and damp heat. So you've gone from a situation of excess damp and cold that has in itself generated a heat problem. In that congested tissue state, the damp congested tissue state, the patient is more susceptible to deep tissue infections, because there's poor organisation of the extracellular matrix. It can't sort of keep the invaders out. the microbes can penetrate deeper and deeper. And as I said, stagnant nutrients and waste products encourage microbial growth. So something like cellulitis would be a really sort of nasty consequence of that. We find that with the congested tissues, the tissues most affected are skin, musculoskeletal tissues, and the connective tissues. So there you, I meant to delete that off there because it was going down below, but there you go. And the simplest way to remedy it is to counter it with alternatives. So alternatives do more than merely eliminate. They transform the tissue health so that it drains the stagnation and it prevents further congestion. So if you like, they're corrective. They're correcting the state that the tissues have got into. They have a depurative effect. It makes things pure again and working more smoothly. But a lot of them will have a secondary action as an eliminant. So they might be lymphatic tonics, diuretics working in the kidneys, hepatic tonics, and laxatives, so that lymph, urine, bile, and bowel and stool are all used as channels of elimination. Taste. What do alternatives taste like? Well, they pretty much all taste pretty yucky. They might be exceptionally bitter, like Menanthes, trifoliatum, bog bean, or they could be sour, like Rumex crispus, and Rumex acetosella is quite sour as well. Country name for it in Scotland is Surux, so that sort of tells you something. And in addition to that, fumitory is quite acrid, as you discovered the other week. So that's just an introduction to alternatives, and in another lecture I will talk about the specific herbs. Thank you.